Good afternoon, sir. Could you please state your name and provide your date of birth?
Dave Spicely.
Thank you, Mr. Spicely. And counsel, if you could please announce.
Yes, Devin Montgomery with Matthew Lopez Law on behalf of Mr. Spicely, who is in custody. We would waive a reading of the charges. I did just go over them with Mr. Spicely in the meeting room.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. And then if the state could please announce.
Barbara Paris-Condola for the state.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Paris-Condola. All right, so Mr. Spicely, you're here on a Superior Court direct complaint arrest warrant. So essentially what this means is that the prosecutor's office has now filed charges in your case that you were arrested on, I believe, just a day or two ago. I know, counsel, you've said I could waive the charges, but because this is a recorded hearing, I do want to go over those. So the charges are 1 count of murder in the first degree during a crime that's a Class 1 felony, 1 count of murder in the second degree, knowing a Class 1 felony, 1 count of drive-by shooting, a Class 2 felony, 1 count of disorderly conduct involving a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument, a Class 6 felony, and 1 count of discharge of a firearm in city limits, which is a Class 6 felony. Ms. Montgomery, you are just appearing for limited purposes in this hearing, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Spicely, I have appointed you an attorney at this time. If you do end up hiring Ms. Montgomery or another private attorney, then that attorney, your attorney can file a notice of appearance in this case. So, Ms. Montgomery, do you wish to be heard regarding release conditions?
Yes, Judge, I do, and I apologize. I'm going to be looking at my notes. There's a lot to cover.
No, don't worry about it at all. That's just fine.
We are asking for a $250,000 secured appearance bond. Reason being, Mr. Spicely is 18 years old. The victim in this case is a grown man. He's 33 years old. And prior to the intersection where the shooting occurred, Mr. Spicely had not engaged in any road rage, despite what the state alleges. The victim had. Spicely had pulled in front of his vehicle, and this upset the victim, who then proceeded to tailgate Mr. Spicely. At one point, he pulls up alongside Mr. Spicely's vehicle, telling him to get out of the vehicle. He's yelling at him to pull over. Mr. Spicely does not engage. Of note, the stretch where this occurred between Pat Tillman to Grand Avenue on 63rd does not have a manner in which he could have got away. There's a median on one side, there's a field to his right. So they're approaching Grand Ave and 163rd, there's a red light, and ultimately Mr. Spicely gets boxed in by this victim. The victim immediately exits his vehicle and aggressively walks toward Mr. Spicely's driver's side window. Again, this was done in an aggressive manner. Now, the victim's vehicle can be used as a dangerous instrument, and at that point, the victim had used it as a dangerous instrument. He tried running Mr. Spicely off the road. So there's still a threat present, and now Mr. Spicely is stuck, and this man is approaching the vehicle. Unknown if he's armed. We do live in Arizona. A lot of people possess firearms. Road rage is an issue in the state of Arizona, during which firearms are frequently used. He's scared and he fears for his life. He tells the victim to go back to his vehicle. He tries to de-escalate the situation. The individual does not return to his vehicle, continues to approach Mr. Spicely in an aggressive manner and yelling, had already tried to run him off the road, and Mr. Spicely thought he was going to die. So he acted with the intent to defend himself, Your Honor. He did not act with the intent to kill anybody. And what's really, really important here, and I think weighs heavily in our request, is that there is only one eyewitness to this incident from start to finish, and it is an independent witness. This person is not mentioned in the Form 4. This person was not mentioned by the state. This person was most likely not mentioned at the grand jury or to the grand jury. That information was not presented to them. All other witness referenced by the state only observed the shooting. So there was an individual in front of him, which kind of resulted in why he got boxed in. It sounds like there were some people on Grand Ave, but there was only one eyewitness to this incident. This person contacted Surprise PD. Surprise PD did return her call, but they kind of brushed her off. They showed no interest in hearing what she had to say, and they told her they would call her back the following day. I've spoken with this individual. That individual has not been contacted by Surprise PD. It blows my mind that the only person who saw from start to finish what happened in this incident is being completely ignored and brushed aside, and none of that information has been presented to the court, by the state, or the police department. Understandably so, that information maybe didn't get to the state because the police hadn't presented it to them, but it's a huge issue and it absolutely weighs in favor of the requested bond. Her story deserves to be heard, so I'm going to tell you what I have discussed with her. Her name's Rochelle Hudson. She was driving a silver gray 2006 Pontiac Solstice. It is a convertible with a black top, and that vehicle will be seen on surveillance footage. She's not the registered owner, but the registered owner is her best friend, and her name is Dorothy Dina. Again, she had contacted Surprise PD. She got brushed off, and this is her story. So she had been pulling out of the Fry's parking lot, Your Honor, when she first observed these vehicles. They're both traveling at a high rate of speed. She didn't know. At first, she thought maybe they were just like racing each other. However, as she continued to observe what was going on, she saw the victim's vehicle speeding up behind and nearly colliding with Mr. Spicely's vehicle. She pulled up alongside Mr. Spicely's vehicle, or I'm sorry, not she. This victim pulls up alongside Mr. Spicely's vehicle, appears to try to make him get over or attempt to run him off the road. He's screaming. She can tell that he's aggravated, and so much so that she kind of backs off a little bit with her vehicle. However, she can still see what's going on. She can still see both vehicles. She told me that Mr. Spicely's vehicle was always in front. The victim, or the person in the white car, as she described it, was always behind and chasing him down. She describes the victim as aggressive and intimidating when he's walking up, which goes against the state's witnesses' statements. She said, and this stood out to me, that she had no doubt this guy was going to be doing something to the kid at this point. Her description of Mr. Spicely: never once did she see him roll down his window or do anything. He was always trying to speed up to get away from that car. He never slowed down to try to engage, just looked like he was trying to get away. At no point does he brake check him or slam on his brakes. And when he approaches this intersection where there's a red light and he knows he's about to get stuck, she noted that he pulled up incredibly close to the vehicle who was in front of him. And her thought at the time was that she was thinking she was trying to get someone's attention, or he was trying to get someone's attention, or at least be close enough so that nothing would happen because there's other people around. Where they ultimately come to a stop is obviously at a red light, but there's also railroad tracks there. Typically, the distance between where you need to stop and the railroad tracks allows for enough room for a couple vehicles. Mr. Spicely had pulled up so closely to the vehicle in front of him, and then the victim had pulled up so closely behind Mr. Spicely that all three had fit in that space, and he was absolutely boxed in. He could not go anywhere. The only reason he was able to get out of that space after the incident was because the vehicle that was in front of him did move forward, which allowed for enough space for him to pull out. He didn't take off immediately. This is according to this independent witness. However, the passenger of the vehicle was outside of her vehicle yelling. Again, her thought process, her perspective was that maybe he was trying to avoid another incident, or he thought there was an ongoing threat, and so he just wanted to get out of the area. She actually followed him when he did that. She wanted to get his license plate, and she described his driving behavior on Grand Ave, not as taking off, not driving erratic, not trying to get away or avoid her ability to catch up to him or do whatever she was trying to do. He was, if anything, going under the speed limit, and she was able to get his license plate. A couple of things that stood out to me during my conversation with her, Your Honor. She stated that if it was her kid or anybody else, she thinks anybody would have reacted in the same manner. She also mentioned that by the look of the face that she saw in his rearview mirror, she could tell he was terrified. So again, the state's trying to present this as he's laughing, not taking this serious or had no remorse for what happened. We have an independent witness who observed not only the shooting, but everything leading up to it, and it contradicts everything they're saying. The state summary of events are one-sided. It's missing incredibly important information. The state mentions that Mr. Spicely has family in India, and that's a concern for flight. For the record, Mr. Spicely was born here. He's been to India once. He's 1.5 years old. He probably doesn't even remember going, nor does he know his family. He does have a passport, however, that is expired, and he is willing to give that up to the court if necessary. He has only been here in Arizona for 8 months. He and his mom moved here from California because they couldn't afford the cost of living in California. So he has ties here. His mom's here. I do think that the fact that he reported himself should weigh heavily in his favor. I know the state's trying to say that he only called after his mom told him to do so and that the officers were already at his house. That's not possible. They didn't know where he lived. He called and provided his address so they could come to his house to arrest him. I've spoken to his mom. She did not tell him. She sure encouraged him when he said he was going to do it. She did not tell him to call. She wasn't even home when he got there. She was picking up the dog that he was on his way to get when all this went down. So, for those reasons, we believe the $250K secured appearance is appropriate. That is what the original initial appearance judge set. I was here on Sunday when this all first happened. Obviously, the charges may have changed. Your Honor, the facts have not changed. If anything, we now have this independent witness that would weigh in favor of a lower bond. Considering this testimony was likely not presented to the grand jury, it's not in the Form 4, it's not in the news at the moment, it's not in the state's recommendation on their grand jury warrant. This case is honestly worthy of a remand, and because of that, I don't think much weight ought to be given to the bond that was set after it got through the grand jury, at least not the same weight I know it normally is given under these circumstances, and greater weight should absolutely be given to the original judge's bond that she set at the $250,000, or $250,000, my apologies, secured appearance bond. So, long-winded, but there was a lot that has not been considered by anybody at this point, and it deserves to get out. He has a corroborative witness who has no attachment to him, Your Honor, who saw everything from the beginning to the end, and this is much different than how it's been presented to the court. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Ms. Parsons-Gondola, does the state have a position?
Your Honor, I have what counsel has and you have before you, which is direct complaint warrant with the bond amount listed for $1 million cash. That was the recommended amount by the Superior Court judge, and then I will not read through the information as to the explanation. It's there in writing. That's what I have, and it does paint a very different picture. It mentions one witness, and then it goes on to talk about eyewitness account, plural, and talks about the victim not being armed. So for all those reasons, and the fact that that was after it was reviewed and charged than the charges before, which are very serious, involving the death of this victim, the state is requesting that you do go and not reduce from that bond that is on the direct complaint warrant of $1 million cash.
Thank you, Ms. Parsons-Gondola. Okay. So I have read the reasons stated in the warrant for the request for the $1 million cash bond. Ms. Montgomery, I've heard what you've had to say as well, and I do appreciate that, adding the information. So, I mean, you know, the state's saying that there's eyewitnesses seeing one thing, you're telling me there's an eyewitness seeing something different, and sometimes people see different things. And so I'm sure there will be a lot more evidence coming out. The warrant, though, does go on. The warrant goes on, though, to say, and these are the parts in particular that I'm focusing on, again, knowing that, I mean, what I do know is that there's someone, a father, who is dead at this point. That we know. And then there's differing accounts as to what happened, what Mr. Spicely did, who was the aggressor, etc. What's the state is saying here, and that since they're saying this is what's on camera, I'm going to assume is correct. And Ms. Montgomery, you'll be able to obtain the camera footage so that you can see. But it says the defendant can be seen extending his middle finger towards the surveillance camera while complaining that officers provided him with a Chick-fil-A sandwich and a brownie for dessert rather than pizza. And it says, after eating, defendant is seen laughing and dancing in the room until officers return and transport him to the booking area. And so that's extremely concerning to me. And so I am very concerned about public safety. The state constitution requires me to set a bond based off of public safety. I am going to set the cash bond that was requested. It is a cash bond in the amount of $1 million. If, Mr. Spicely, you pay that bond, you will be released. You will then be on, will need to comply with pretrial services supervision, and you will have an ankle monitor, and you will be under house arrest as well. In addition, you must comply with the standard conditions and restrictions of release. You are also not to return to the scene of the alleged crime. You are not to initiate contact with any alleged victims, complainants, or witnesses, or have any physical contact with any alleged victims. You are not to possess any weapons. You must surrender all passports at your next court date, and you must obey the terms of any order of protection or injunction against harassment that has been issued or which may be issued. In addition, Mr. Spice, you may not have any contact with the deceased victim's spouse, parent, child, grandparent, or sibling, any other person related to the victim by consanguinity or affinity to the second degree, or any other lawful representative of the deceased alleged victim. Ms. Montgomery, do you have any questions?
No, Judge.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Ms. Person-Dole, does the state have anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Again, to both counsel, thank you for your time today, and thank you, Mr. Spicely.